Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It is day one in the U.S. versus the R. Kelly trial in Brooklyn, New York. Opening statements are underway in the federal trial for the R&B singer. Robert Sylvester Kelly is accused of sex trafficking and racketeering. He faces 9 counts involving 6 different women, some of whom were underage at the time of the alleged offenses. Now, Kelly has maintained his innocence on all of the charges. Note that there are no cameras allowed in the courtroom, as this is a federal case prohibiting access, but the media covering the case are able to watch the proceedings via a closed circuit camera at the courthouse. With us now, Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae, who is there on the ground in Brooklyn, New York, covering the latest directly out of the courtroom. Julia, always good to see you. What is the latest from court?
Judge, actually, the latest is that opening statements have concluded in this case. Both the prosecution and the defense have finished letting this jury know what they intend to prove or what they say the evidence will not prove in the case of the defense in this case. We've heard a lot, especially from the prosecution, about who is going to be taking the stand. And the first witness today is actually going to be one of the Jane Does, Geronda Pace. She is going to testify about being 16 years old when the sexual contact between her and the defendant, Robert Sylvester Kelly, happened. We've also heard from this defense team, and they actually arriving in court today. We watched them all walking in as a team. They are new to the singer's team, really being hired and put on this case in June, and that's Nicole Blank-Becker, Thomas Farinella, Devereaux Canick, and also Calvin Scholar. 4 people who are there sitting at the defense table with him, where he is looking generally comfortable today, keeping his head down during most of the statements that were being made, but also looking rather somber when the discussion came about Jane Doe number 1, who was identified today as R&B singer Aaliyah.
All right, so Jane Doe number 1, Aaliyah, has now been identified because we didn't know whether or not they'd be identified in court. It's Jane Doe. And so what else, Julia, have we heard about the alleged victims in this case?
Well, we have heard, like you just said, we've heard that one name that has been now confirmed, and they've used first names for most of them, but also about Geronda Pace. She is the one who is going to be taking the stand, and we'll be hearing her testimony in front of this jury. She's been identified by first and last names, but there have been some really detailed things that the prosecution laid out in their opening statements about what it was like for these women when they were kept in rooms inside of R. Kelly's home or inside of his musical studio. One thing stood out to me, that the prosecutor said that sometimes they were not allowed to leave the room and resorted to urinating in cups because they couldn't get a hold of the defendant to give the instruction to allow them to do some of the most basic things. So that's what this jury is hearing about. They're hearing about an enterprise. That's what the prosecution has to prove in this case. Today, we also saw outside of the courthouse Gloria Allred, who represents several of the alleged victims in this case, not necessarily the ones that are going to take the stand in the indictment part of this case, but ones that will be added or coming in under uncharged similar acts that the prosecution believes is going to show a pattern. Here's what she had to say early this morning before court started.
All I can say is that I'm very confident that the court will afford a fair trial, both to Mr. Kelly and also to the persons who allege that they are victims.
Right, and we know like almost 15 years ago it didn't work out. You're very confident today is a different day this year?
I'm confident that there'll be a fair trial in this case in federal court.
So who are you representing today?
3 of the alleged victims for whom charges have been filed in federal court in this case.
Okay.
And also 3 other important potential witnesses in this case who may testify.
And Judge Ashley, there were not only people who were here on behalf of alleged victims in this case, but also supporters. I saw them at times hugging the defense attorneys as they came in. They've been very vocal about believing that all of these charges against the defendant are trumped up, that they are not true, and they plan to be here as often as they can, even though many of them have not been allowed to get into the overflow room because of the limitations inside.
And I understand that the defense is that it was consensual, that he didn't do anything wrong. Tell us, if you would, before we talk about the opening statements, Julia, how he looks, because we know that he was not given bond, and so he is in jail. How does he look there today during opening statements in terms of his dress and demeanor?
We have a very extremely clean-cut looking defendant who is sitting there. He, of course, is dressed in a suit, gray suit today, white shirt, matching tie. Even though we don't see him on camera at all, we got to record outside his suit being carried into the courtroom, and I don't think that's the one that he is wearing today, but it seems that he has someone to bring it, to hand over to the guards for him to wear in the preceding days, the days that are coming up in this case. So he is looking comfortable in his seat. He's looking a little less nervous than I noticed during jury selection last week.
So let's shift now to the content. What stood out to you about the prosecution and the defense's opening statements that they made just this morning?
Well, the prosecution's opening statement was delivered by Maria Melendez. She's an assistant U.S. attorney, and really it was very clear and organized in the way that she presented this case. And here's how she started it out. She told this jury this case is about a predator, a man who for decades used his fame and a network of people at his disposal to target and groom women, girls, men, and boys for his own sexual gratification. And she backed that up with the evidence that these jurors are going to hear, the testimony about his entourage, the people who helped orchestrate these women and girls, men and boys who were brought to him and were kept, were kidnapped, were not allowed to leave, and were subject to a litany of rules. I think it was very clearly laid out. As far as the defense attorney who presented the opening statements, Nicole Becker-Blank, she presented really, it seemed like a meandering opening statement. Here's a general point that came at the beginning of that opening statement. She said the fundamental reason that we are here is because the government wants you to believe that our client, an internationally known singer, is the leader of a large enterprise, similar to John Gotti. The evidence will show that this is uncharted territory, but I can tell you that the judge wouldn't let them get too much into trying to argue that the racketeering and RICO charges are not appropriate in this case, because that's something that was litigated pre-trial. And at this point, the judge had to instruct her, stop opening statements and let her know that the charges are what they are. You can only talk about what the evidence is expected to show. So we got a lot from the defense in terms of the discrediting that they are doing of the Jane Does, but not a lot of organization as to where this defense is going to take things and what the defense may be in this case.
And it's really hard because you never want a judge to interrupt your opening statement. That's not a good look in terms of what you want the jury to see. So, Julia, I must ask two things. I just note, when you say in an opening statement it's an enterprise similar to John Gotti and that's what they're trying to prove, well, you're taking a risk because jurors may or may not know who that person is. But what I also want to ask you in this, it's my understanding that the defense attorneys are newer, as you already said, and started in June. They did ask for a continuance, did they not, in order to be prepared to go forward?
You are correct. They did ask. That's Devereaux Canick. So he's a New York attorney who asked for a motion to delay the trial or put that before the judge. But the two attorneys who are actually doing a lot of the, it seems, work today, and especially Nicole Becker, who is a Michigan attorney, they told the judge early on that they were prepared to go forward, that them coming on to the case would not slow things down. And that was because the former attorneys, Stephen Greenberg and Michael Leonard, they were requesting to be allowed to withdraw from this case. So that was part of the agreement, that if they were able to withdraw, these attorneys would come in and there would be no delay in the trial. So yes, they did ask for that. That was denied. But there are two attorneys on that four-person team who said that they would be ready to go.
And I know, I mean, Julia, this is allegations that have spanned for more than 20 years, 3 decades. So certainly I appreciate you're going to stay with us